So in this bear market where there's nothing more to do than to hodl our coins and wait, what better time than to research and learn about projects that we haven't had a chance to do before. So in this season 2, episode 2 of Real Talk on Crypto Coins, I'm going to be covering Ethereum Classic, a project that's been around for quite a while, closely related to Ethereum of course, but has recently been thrusted back into the spotlight because of its listing on Coinbase. So if you're interested in learning a quick history about Ethereum Classic and also the pros and cons of this project, then just keep on watching. Hi everyone, I'm Kevin from BFB and welcome back to another episode of Real Talk on Crypto Coins, where I take a deep dive into projects and cover the good and the bad, no shilling, no FUD. So if you can support me real quick by smashing that like button and subscribing down below, then I would greatly appreciate that. But without further ado, let's take a look at this project. Okay, so Ethereum Classic, or ticker symbol ETC. I've included the logo on the left. It looks very similar to Ethereum, but it's green. And also Barry Silbert, one of its most famous and earliest supporters. So what is Ethereum Classic? Well, it's very closely tied to Ethereum and actually has a shared history. Just a brief refresher, and this is by no means a comprehensive overview. So if that's what you're looking for, then I suggest you go watch a different YouTube video first before watching this one. But this is the original chain that ETH hard forked from July 2016. So they have a common history before, but then they split, and then everyone following the Ethereum or ETH chain was no longer compatible with the original chain. So this all started with a DAO, which was a decentralized venture capital fund set up in the early days of Ethereum to kind of crowdfund and decide democratically which projects in the space to support with funding. However, the smart contract that controlled the DAO was hacked for 3.6 million Ethereum, worth roughly $50 million at the time. This was a huge amount of Ethereum, and a lot of people think it represented an existential crisis for the project because the hacker would have control of such a significant portion of the circulating balance of Ethereum. But due to how the smart contract code was written, the hacker had to wait 28 days before accessing those ether. So the Ethereum community came together and debated and voted to hard fork and reverse the hack. However, there were some people who believed that code is law and supported the original chain instead, and hence Ethereum Classic and Ethereum became two separate blockchains. And on the right hand side, that's just a logo of the DAO. Just included it if you're curious about what that is. So let's take a look at some pros or advantages of this project. First and foremost, it is true to the spirit of blockchain, right? And that's basically that the smart contract code is law. If you think about it, one of the main differences between blockchains and other database structures is that it is immutable. But by forking and removing the effects of a smart contract that was legitimately written, it just had a bug that allowed someone to take advantage of it. It does technically go against the principle of immutability. So people were like, this is why we want blockchain, let's not violate this principle. And it does make a lot of sense in my opinion. They also do have an active dev team with their own roadmap. This is just a snapshot of the ETC dev team with their logo on the right hand side. As you can see, there are active developers working on this project. However, this is an open source project, so they're not the only people out there working on it. There are other people working on different parts of the ecosystem and recommending their own changes to improve the Ethereum Classic blockchain. And I've included a snapshot of their roadmap that I got from the ETC dev team website. Now this is just kind of to get a feel for what's on their mind, what they will be proposing to the Ethereum Classic community in the future. But some interesting things to note is that they want to build out side chains. They want to remove the difficulty bomb in terms of proof of work mining. I'll touch a little bit more on that later. They also want to focus on IoT, or Internet of Things, and also interoperability with other blockchains. As you can see, there are some different focuses than the Ethereum blockchain. They're not just trying to copy and do the same thing as Ethereum. They also have some well-known backers. You have Charles Hoskinson. Many of you guys may know him from Cardano, but his group IOHK is actually working on both projects. If you go to their website, you will see them actively working on both Cardano and Ethereum Classic. And so he was one of the founders of Ethereum, and he is one of the biggest proponents of immutability and code as law. That's one of the main reasons why he works on Ethereum Classic and doesn't work with the Ethereum anymore. Another person who's really famous supporting Ethereum Classic is Barry Silbert. He's the founder of the Digital Currency Group and has backed many crypto projects and has been a big believer in crypto since the very beginning with Bitcoin. So because of these well-known backers, it means that it does give this project a little bit more legitimacy. As long as they are actively working on it, it has a good chance to continue to grow, although maybe not as fast as some other projects. There's also some technical differences because they did come from the same code base after all, but they have some slight changes since their fork. For example, Ethereum Classic decided to go with a capped model of emission, kind of similar to Bitcoin, having a total number of Bitcoin ever released out in circulation by mining rewards, for example. Ethereum Classic is set to be 210 million, and Ethereum currently does not have a cap. And they also have talked that they see that Ethereum is doing a lot of stuff with proof of stake and moving towards that, but they're not sure that that's the way they want to go. So that's why they kind of did that removing of the difficulty bomb that was planned a long time ago. And so this can give them more flexibility to stick with proof of work if they indeed so choose to. Now, let's take a look at some cons or disadvantages of this project. Well, the majority of people in the beginning days did go with the Ethereum chain, and that includes Gavin Wood, Joseph Lubin, Vitalik Buterin, and a lot of other big names in this space. They all went to the Ethereum Foundation, which now officially supports the ETH chain. So why is that important, and what does that exactly mean? Well, because they are there, a lot of the development work and innovation is coming out of the ETH side, and I will talk a little bit more about this later. But I also want to note that Bitcoin maximalists are a big part of the early support of Ethereum Classic, and they may be doing this not to benefit Ethereum Classic, but to rather hurt altcoins so that Bitcoin can reign king, because that's the whole belief of Bitcoin maximalists, that Bitcoin is the one true crypto and can do everything that all these altcoins are trying to do. And here's an article I found talking about this, but basically Vitalik Buterin wrote in a post that he points out Bitcoin maximalists have tried to add fuel to the ETC fire, and it has been helping the Classic chain thrive, and they have been doing so to cause infighting in the Ethereum ecosystem and to hurt them so that Bitcoin can succeed instead. So because of this, I consider this a con of the project, because it would be better for their supporters to like Ethereum Classic out of true belief in the project and true belief in the principle. They should be all out supporting Ethereum Classic without worrying about their one true love, Bitcoin. Also, Ethereum right now is just more innovative, right? There's a lot of problems facing Ethereum right now and other smart contract platforms like scalability, consensus safety, privacy, just to name a few. And Ethereum Foundation has been working hard coming up with many ideas to implement, such as sharding, Plasma, ZK Snarks, Casper, some of them already well along the way in terms of implementation. So because of that, Ethereum is way more nimble and innovative than Ethereum Classic, making it more promising for investors and businesses support in the present landscape. Ethereum Classic also just has a smaller ecosystem than Ethereum. For example, Ethereum has the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, which has a lot of enterprise support for the broader ecosystem. And also, just looking at Ethereum Classic, it is a dApps platform, but where are the ICOs and dApps? I personally can't name any off the top of my head. There are a handful, but none of them are known to the general crypto space at all. So we need real adoption and people to build on top of the Ethereum Classic platform for it to really succeed. And finally, I touched on how the immutability principle, or the code is law, of Ethereum Classic is great and definitely holds true to crypto, but also the market doesn't seem to care, right? I mean, if you take a look at Ethereum Classic, it really only went up to like above 40 at a peak and then dropped back down to about $12 right now. But Ethereum started off about the same price range as Ethereum Classic, but went all the way up over $1,200. So the market really isn't that idealistic and purist, and it seems to be saying that Ethereum has won this battle. So what are my personal thoughts? And of course, this is not investment advice, but would I invest in this project? Personally, no, I would not. But I do not consider it a dead project, because there are active supporters, developers working on this and implementing a roadmap. What do I like about this project? Well, first, its active dev team, and also its Coinbase listing and its continued accessibility across various exchanges. What I don't like is that Ethereum has a much stronger ecosystem, and that many supporters of Ethereum Classic only supported that chain because they were Bitcoin maximalists and didn't want to see Ethereum succeed. So my suggestions is for the dev team and the community to adopt more changes that differentiate from Ethereum to grow adoption, and is definitely on the right track to do so, but also just try to convince more companies to build on top of the platform and grow the ecosystem slowly but surely. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something today. If you agree or disagree with my pros and cons, I would love to hear from you down in the comments below. And once again, if you could support me by smashing that like button and subscribing if you haven't already, I would greatly appreciate that. This is Kevin. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and see you guys next time.